The knife glinted in Patricia's hand as my wheelchair-bound daughter screamed. HOA regulations don't care about your dead mother's roses, she spat. What this power-hungry Karen didn't realize. I wasn't just a grieving father, I was the county sheriff. As my deputy's sirens wailed in the distance, I made her a promise. You'll learn the difference between petty rules and real justice. But could I reach my bleeding daughter before it was too late? Blood dripped from the knife as Patricia Winters stood over my daughter's wheelchair. HOA regulations, she snarled while Sophie clutched her sliced ribs. Patricia didn't know I was the county sheriff. Didn't realize the patrol cars racing toward our home carried men who called me boss. Justice would come swiftly. Before watching the full story, comment below from where you're watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The scream pierced through our backyard, followed by the terrified cry of my daughter. I wasn't there to witness it. I was at the sheriff's station when the call came in. 7 minutes. That's how fast I drove home. 7 minutes to imagine my daughter bleeding out in the garden her mother never lived to see finished. Later, the security cameras would show it all. Patricia Winters, head of our neighborhood HOA, marching into our backyard with gardening shears and a knife, slashing at the rose bushes my late wife had planted. My 16-year-old daughter, Sophie, paralyzed from the waist down after a car accident 3 years ago, wheeling herself out to stop the destruction of her mother's memorial garden. Mom's roses matter. Sophie choked, blood blooming across her shirt like the petals Patricia had destroyed. The argument, Patricia's face twisting with rage, the knife swinging, and then blood spreading across Sophie's shirt as she collapsed in her wheelchair. I wasn't there when my disabled daughter needed me most. My phone rang at 5:30 p.m. Sophie's caretaker, Mrs. Rodriguez, was calling. Her voice shattered with panic. Sheriff Taylor, she cried. That HOA woman, she stabbed Sophie. There's blood everywhere. The ambulance is coming, but oh God, she cut her with a knife. The world tilted. In 15 years as county sheriff, I'd seen murder scenes less frightening than the images flooding my mind. The 15-minute drive home took me 7 minutes. 3 patrol cars followed without me asking. My deputies knew my daughter was my world. When I pulled into our driveway, chaos greeted me. Neighbors stood in shocked clusters. The ambulance lights painted everything in pulsing red. 2 paramedics were wheeling Sophie out on a stretcher, an oxygen mask covering her face, shirt soaked with blood. Her wheelchair sat abandoned by the rose bushes, spattered with crimson droplets. Sophie, I ran to her side, my badge and gun suddenly meaningless against whatever had hurt my child. Sophie's eyes fluttered open. Dad, she whispered through the mask. I'm okay. Mrs. Rodriguez stood nearby, shaking. I tried to stop her. Sheriff, I tried. Stop who? What happened? My voice was barely controlled as I held Sophie's hand. That woman from the HOA, Mrs. Rodriguez pointed across the street where Patricia Winters stood with her arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a scowl on her face. She came into your backyard with gardening shears. When Sophie went outside in her wheelchair to ask what she was doing, the woman got angry. One of the paramedics approached me. 3 deep lacerations to her right side. The knife cut across 2 of her ribs. I kissed Sophie's forehead as they loaded her into the ambulance. I'll be right behind you, sweetheart. Deputy Jenkins touched my shoulder. Go with Sophie, sir. We'll handle things here. But I couldn't move. 20 years in law enforcement had taught me to control my emotions. But seeing my daughter's blood had awakened something primal. Patricia didn't know the man in those squad cars called me sir. Or that I'd spent 20 years putting away monsters far scarier than an HOA tyrant with a pruning fetish. I walked across the street, my uniform suddenly feeling too tight. Patricia Winters didn't back away as I approached. She stood taller, her expensive cardigan spotless, her manicured hands holding a clipboard. Sheriff Taylor, she said coolly. While this is unfortunate, Perhaps now you'll address the violations on your property. Violations? My voice was dangerously quiet. She consulted her clipboard. The rose bushes along your fence exceed the 30-inch height restriction. I left 3 notices. When no action was taken, I proceeded to enforce compliance as authorized by HOA bylaws. You entered my property without permission and injured my daughter. Patricia sneered. Your wife's dead. Her weeds don't get special treatment, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. Your daughter interfered with official HOA business. I was simply removing the non-compliant vegetation when she came at me. The knife was for cutting twine. It was self-defense. My deputies had gathered behind me. Mrs. Rodriguez had shown them the security camera footage from our porch. Deputy Jenkins leaned in and whispered, "We've seen the video, sir. The woman is lying." She deliberately swung the knife at Sophie when Sophie tried to stop her from cutting down the roses. The roses Mrs. Taylor planted before she passed. Something broke inside me then. Not the control. I kept that. But the barrier between Sheriff Taylor and Sophie's father dissolved completely. Patricia Winters, you're under arrest for criminal trespass, assault with a deadly weapon, and aggravated battery against a disabled minor. Her expression shifted from smugness to shock. You can't arrest me. I'm enforcing HOA regulations. HOA regulations don't supersede the law, I said as Deputy Jenkins cuffed her. And they certainly don't give you the right to stab a child. I didn't know she was disabled. Patricia shrieked as they led her to a patrol car. And those roses violate Code Section 5.3. I finally got into my car and followed the ambulance. At the hospital, Sophie needed 37 stitches, 2 broken ribs, a surgeon's warning, half an inch deeper, and she'd be gone. I memorized those numbers like they were the code to bring her mother back. Would you let a stranger destroy your family's last connection to someone they loved? That night, as Sophie slept in her hospital bed, I made calls not as a father seeking revenge, but as a sheriff doing his job. By morning, I had learned a lot about Patricia Winters. She had been sued 3 times for similar HOA overreach in other communities. Each case settled quietly. She had a suspended real estate license for ethics violations. And most importantly, she'd been collecting excessive fines from our neighborhood for 2 years. Money that never made it to the HOA treasury. I visited the district attorney first thing in the morning. By noon, Patricia faced additional charges of fraud, embezzlement, and a pattern of harassment. The judge denied bail due to the violent nature of her attack on Sophie. While Sophie recovered, neighbors I barely knew filled our house with food and flowers. Many shared stories of Patricia's intimidation tactics. Families who'd moved rather than fight her. Elderly residents who paid fines for violations they hadn't committed. 2 weeks later, I wheeled Sophie into the courthouse for Patricia's preliminary hearing. Patricia's lawyer had been confident they'd get the charges reduced until the prosecution played the security footage. The video showed everything. Sophie in her wheelchair rolling into the backyard. Patricia aggressively cutting down the roses. Sophie pleading with her to stop, explaining they were planted by her late mother. Patricia turning, anger distorting her face, deliberately slashing at Sophie with the knife not once, but 3 times as Sophie tried to shield herself. The security footage showed 3 slashes, but only one cut deeper than the knife. The courtroom fell silent. Patricia's lawyer requested a brief recess. When court resumed, Patricia accepted a plea deal, 8 years for aggravated assault, plus restitution to all HOA residents she had defrauded. The judge called it aggravated assault. I called it karma. But Sophie? She was already sketching plans for rose bushes that would outgrow every HOA rulebook in the state. As we left the courthouse, Sophie looked up at me. Dad, can we replant Mom's roses? Of course, sweetheart. Higher than 30 inches, too. She smiled. You know what Mom always said about her roses? I nodded, my throat tight. Sarah had planted those roses the day we brought Sophie home from the hospital. Beauty should never be regulated, I quoted. Life slowly returned to normal. The neighborhood elected a new HOA board that focused on community rather than punishment. Sophie's scars healed, though she would always carry the marks of that day. One morning, 6 months after the incident, I found Sophie in the backyard early before school. She was carefully tending the new rose bushes we'd planted. "They're growing so well," she said when she noticed me watching. "Mom would be happy." I knelt beside her wheelchair. "What made you come out here so early?" Sophie adjusted her glasses. "I had a dream about Mom." She said, "Sometimes beautiful things come after terrible days." She touched the largest rose bush, its stems stretching well beyond the previous HOA's height restrictions. She said, "We shouldn't let fear stop us from growing." I looked at my daughter, the strongest person I knew, and felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I had spent months angry at Patricia, the system that had given her authority, at myself for not being home that day. "Your mom was pretty smart," I said. "The smartest," Sophie agreed. "Dad, I've been thinking. I want to start a support group at school for kids with disabilities. A lot of them are afraid to speak up when things are wrong." I helped her adjust her wheelchair. "I think that's a great idea." "I wasn't sure before," she admitted. "I thought maybe people would just see my wheelchair or my scars, but now I know that standing up for yourself matters, even when it's scary." As I pushed her back toward the house, Sophie pointed to a letter in our mailbox. It was from the state prosecutor's office. Patricia Winter's appeal had been denied. She would serve her full sentence. I could have felt satisfaction or vindication. Instead, I felt only relief that one chapter had closed, allowing new ones to begin. That evening, while helping Sophie with her homework, I received a call from the mayor. "Taylor," he said without preamble, "the city council wants to revise all HOA regulations after what happened with your daughter. They need someone who understands both the law and community to oversee it. Interested?" I looked at Sophie, who was watching me curiously. "I might be," I told him, "but I'll need to bring my chief advisor to the meetings." Sophie raised her eyebrows. After hanging up, I explained the mayor's request. "They want you to fix the HOAs?" Sophie asked. "They want us to help make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else," I corrected. "Your perspective matters in this." Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We should start by making rules about entering people's property and maybe add something about respecting memorial plantings." I smiled. "I think those are excellent suggestions, Chief Advisor Taylor." That night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she grabbed my hand. "Dad, I'm not angry anymore about what happened." "You're not." She shook her head. "Being angry takes too much energy. I'd rather use that energy to change things." I kissed her forehead, marveling at her wisdom. "When did you get to be smarter than your old man?" She grinned. "I've always been smarter. I just let you be the sheriff so you feel important." We laughed together, and for the first time in months, it felt completely genuine. The next day, a certified letter arrived for Sophie. Inside was a handwritten note from Patricia Winters. "I am writing to apologize for my actions," it began. "There is no excuse for what I did. Every day I remember the look on your face when I hurt you and am filled with shame. I don't expect forgiveness, but want you to know that I understand now how wrong I was." Sophie read it twice, then carefully folded it back into the envelope. "What do you think?" I asked her. "I think," she said slowly, "that sometimes people can change, but only if they're held accountable first." As I watched my daughter roll toward the backyard to check on her mother's roses, now growing freely toward the sky, I realized Sophie had found something I was still working on: the balance between justice and mercy. The roses had begun to bloom again, pushing past their scars from being cut down. Like Sophie, they had emerged stronger, more vibrant, refusing to be limited by the damage done to them. And watching them both grow, I found healing too. What would you sacrifice to protect what's yours?